broadcasting from Atlanta, Georgia. In tonight's edition of Tough Talking Thursday, we're going to be looking at the big C that Ente Miata sang about, and that is corruption. Corruption, corruption, the big C is killing us. What is corruption? What are the root causes? What role can I, the governments, civil society, everybody else play in minimizing corruption? That's the topic tonight, and I'm glad to have a full house to discuss corruption, its impact on our society, the root causes, and what we can do to curb it. People use minimize. I want to include curb. I believe we can eradicate corruption. And so let's talk about it. So joining me to discuss this all important discussion is former Commissioner Massa Emilio Washington, journalist and an advocate. Massa, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Dennis. A pleasure always.
And Massa is joining us from, this thing is not balanced, too many Philadelphia people. Also, it's Comrade Ikena Wesley, who's joining us also from the city of Brotherly Love. Comrade Wesley, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you. And full disclosure, I first met Comrade Wesley in the 1990s at Oru Camp in Nigeria. Comrade, it's glad to meet again.
My pleasure.
Also, we want to welcome our planning and governance consultant, Ahmed Salif, or I would say soon to be Dr. Ahmed Salif. Mr. Salif, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Dennis. Always a pleasure to be here.
I also want to welcome Mr. Wilmot Weti Kuni. He is our chief political analyst. He's also joining us from Philadelphia. Mr. Kuni, welcome to Focus on Liberia.
Dennis, thank you. And really, don't be surprised that Philadelphia is dominating because, Philadelphia is the political capital of the Liberian diaspora. I think that has been established.
Minnesota always say they are, but
Exactly, but whose standard? Don't start a discussion before you start.
Yeah. Last and definitely not the least is my friend from Waplo Institute in Kilipo, Kanwiken, Mr. Mohammed Sharif, who is also our FOL political analyst, and he's joining us from the suburb of Philadelphia. Mr. Sharif, welcome to the show.
Dennis, thank you very much. It's always great to be here. Thank you.
And since I have to balance it because I talk about meeting Comrade Wesley in Uru Camp, I also met Comrade Mohammed Sharif in Zerikore. That's our refugee day in the forest region of Guinea, where Mr. Sharif was one of the elites, Mr. Kuni.
No,
he wasn't. He worked with the student organization and also Ahmad that was in charge of youth services in the refugee area.
I was also a refugee.
Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Refugee journalist as well. So
yes, exactly. Mr. Sharif was among those few people that were training young Liberian students to, first of all, tutoring to take the test and also train them journalism. So, welcome everyone. We're going to be talking about corruption. Mr. Wesley, if you can move up your camera a little bit so that we can see. Yeah. Don't be afraid to show the six packs. It's all part of the show. So let's talk about corruption. And I want to start with Mr. Salif to tell me, Mr. Salif, we want to talk about corruption. Let's start with basic definition. What is corruption?
Thank you, Dennis. And it's an honor once again to be on with all these very well-respected Liberians. And so, yeah, I'm really looking forward to the discussion. Corruption takes so many forms. What we're here to discuss tonight, of course, as you indicated in the beginning, is public corruption.
Sorry, 1 minute. Let me preface this by saying that last week, all around in Liberia, we talk about the sanctions. 3 of our key government officials were sanctioned because of corruption, and they are Mr. Nathaniel Mangill, Presidential Affairs Minister, Mr. Bill Tuawe, the Freeport Manager, and Solicitor General Sema Serenian Cephas. The president has since suspended them, and so the issue of corruption is a big issue and we always talk about corruption. In fact, when the PRC came to power, that's the first time I heard the word or the phrase rampant corruption. So corruption can really be rampant. I don't know what it is now. So based on that, we want to take a step back and focus on what and look at corruption, because also we want to look at what it is, what the impact is, what are some of the root causes, and what we can do to minimize, eradicate, or curb it. So sorry for that, Mr. Sully. Go ahead. What is corruption?
Well, we're focusing on public corruption, as you said. So that means the public sector governance, government and governance, those who engage government services or those who have been entrusted with public office. Those are some of the actors and their co-conspirators. It could be individuals who are engaged with them as partners in business, but also working in the same public sector or in the same government. Corruption, as I began by saying, it takes so many forms. It could be abuse of one's office, where one uses one's authority to acquire advantages or financial or other means, other resources for their own personal aggrandizement, for themselves, their friends, or their relatives or people connected that they connected with. Corruption can also be engaging in fraud, whereby making a certain representation in order for one's benefit. Again, it's all really geared towards one using one's office, or if you have access to, say, a budget, appropriating public funds for yourself, public assets for yourself. That could be use of your office, use of public asset, any type of asset for one's advantage. It could also means using one's connections in government or with other government actors to engage in behavior that is not in the interest of those who will send public officials to represent them, the people, the masses. It could be actions or on inaction even, because sometimes a neglect to act as a public official can be an act of corruption, because by acting could mean that maybe then you won't benefit. It means that you're acting to benefit, to provide the basic services, critical services to citizens, and ignoring those actions so that you may benefit. That is an act of corruption. So again, it could run the gamut of intentional theft. It could run the gamut of fraud. Engaging in fraudery in ways that benefit oneself.
Yeah, thank you. Let me go to Masa, journalist also, and from the TRC background. Let's define corruption once more, and what are some of the instances of corruption have you seen in Liberia in your lifetime? And again, let's restrict this to public corruption, in the corruption in the public space. If somebody at Waterside pick your pocket, I don't want to say that corruption.
Well, Ahmed just did a fantastic job defining, simplistically, public corruption. But what I would add to that is that I think corruption actually takes on the form of two of the seven deadly sins. Honestly, that's how I see it: greed and gluttony. Greed, which is defined as an intense and selfish desire for something, especially wealth, power, or food, for your own benefit. And just listen to this superlative form of the intense gluttony, of an excessive, uncontrollable quest or taste for something as well. Could be food, could be public office, could be power. So it all goes down to the individual's insatiable taste for power. And then so when you do that, what you do is that you deny other people the right and the ability to have something if you're going to steal from the public coffers. And then when you do that, you deny the school children the opportunity to have proper quality education. You deny the market woman the opportunity to be able to do her market, her business, to generate profit, to take care of her family. You deny healthcare workers. Sometimes, people don't get paid. Sometimes the budget is short. So corruption is like an octopus that has tentacles. That's how I see it. It's like in corruption in the Liberian society for me is like an octopus that has all these tentacles that is just spread out. It's like the root of a tree that is so deeply rooted in the ground. It's just spread out, and you know we have to really do something really, really drastic and seriously to deal with corruption in Liberia. So for me, corruption is simply gluttony and greed. That's how I see it.
Thank you. Mr. Cooney, from the law enforcement standpoint, you've seen corruption in the streets. You've seen corruption. Tell me about your experience. And again, you can also add anything you want to add about the definition.
Yes, well, my fellow panelists, I think they've done well for all of us here by providing a basic, simple definition of corruption. Corruption is every dishonest behavior on the part of a public official by public resources. It's fraudulent behavior. It's anything that would take away from the public profit, especially speaking financially, to enhance the selfish desire of that public official to the disadvantage of the citizens. Now, you say you first heard about corruption during the 1980 coup. I first heard the word corruption. I used to hear about it, but I didn't know what it meant until I think it was 1975. As a young boy attending the literacy series of the Movement for Justice in Africa, Moja, when Dr. Tabata, defined corruption. And he said, corruption is, when you take government money, you take the government own money, you build houses and rent it back to the government and get rent from the government. That's corruption. It gets separate definition of corruption. And he said corruption is the government give you money to go buy, let's say, a bulldozer. You buy bulldozer, then you get dozer bull. All of these little tricky things to steal people money. For me, I said, wow, is this thing, because I really didn't know what corruption was until he started giving these practical definitions. Corruption is this, corruption is that. And frankly, the country has been suffering from this behavior from that time on. Even President Talbot, did something to fight corruption. I think he was the first president that established the anti-corruption fighting agency. We used to call it Corruption Bureau at the time. And still, we haven't done much in bringing this menace under control. It continues to be part of our national life. No matter what description we give it, it still continues to evolve and defeat us. Madam Sally declared a personal enemy number one, and later it became, a real partner. The real government is struggling with it. The sanction is evidence of that. So, we as a society, we really have to come together to see how we can put this gina, like you say, if we can put it completely in a bottle, but how we can squeeze it somehow so that our people can begin to enjoy the full benefit of governance, the full benefit of services, and some honesty, some integrity can prevail in governance. And there are some proposals we have answered tonight as the discussion goes on.
Thank you. Mr. Wesley, why do people steal? I like how your man Tiamon Gongolo called it stealing. That shall not steal. Corruption is stealing. Why do people steal public money?
Thank you, Dennis. And I certainly must acknowledge my colleagues who've spoken so eloquently about corruption, starting with Ahmed, Masa, and then Mr. Conan. Whatever the intention to limit us to public corruption, I think honestly, an approach to corruption has got to be holistic. But let me remain within the confines of what you, as our moderator, suggesting that public corruption. Our good friend and compatriot John Molu went to the GHC And as a matter of guiding principle, you talk about waste, fraud, and abuse. When we as a people tune down our ego to the extent that we cease to engage in fraud and abuse, the whole issue of corruption becomes untenable. But when we become perpetrators, which is the meaning relevant to this discourse, or become perpetrators in enforcing fraud and abuse, then of course we deny the school in Feloke, somewhere in Barrow, Maryland County, or as it were, the village of our good friend Mohammed, an opportunity somewhere in River G for having access to health care or basic social services. It is that impact that becomes far reaching because the teachers will not go to school in River G. The healthcare workers will just not show up because somebody, in an attempt to cheat, abuse public office, and commit fraud, will be denying several people across the country in government or public service an opportunity to have access to what their labor has been able to translate into for a period of 29 to 30 days. And so when we go to your suggestion regarding Councillor Gongolo, commandment number 8, thou shalt not steal. Because to steal is to take away from and deny others an opportunity. And once you deny others that opportunity, you deprive them. And it comes along with that inherent nature of man that is conditioned by the ego, the self before all. And once we place the self before all, it disenfranchises and denies a lot of people an opportunity to benefit from the taxes that should either bring their salary at the end of the month
Yeah.
or address the issue of social services across the broad spectrum.
So quickly, Mr. Wesley, why do people do this? And with from time immemorial, stealing public money. Why?
I will answer this way. Later did we know that anonymity is the inherent nature of man until we went to war in 1990. And it became visible that we are inherently warlike. The circumstances that activated that sense of reasoning to see somebody who was a brother yesterday and today you regard him as an enemy sort of inform why people were going about shooting and killing other people innocently.
Thank you.
When we, in our humanness, think that it is only better for us individually rather than in general, because us at the level of the individual is like There's a $10 somewhere that, if equitably used, will benefit the vast majority. But somebody, pursuant to his ego or her ego, is saying that, look, why not take $7 from the $10, and then the $2 can go around, and you know within yourself that the $2 is woefully inadequate to be able to respond or address the needs and concerns of the people involved. So all is rooted in the self, ego, and the lack of morals.
Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Sharif, before I come to you, Amadou Sharif put something here, and we want to discourage these kind of things. Amadou Sharif says this NSA Kunin should not be on your show. He targeted our kinsman using his NSA power, literally ushering us to the author of Samuel Doe, and that author spelling is wrong. Extrajudicial killing, and we all now live here. And this, I can tell you without even asking Mr. Kunin, this is a lie, and people should really stop doing these kind of things. You just have to stop. To make this kind of allegations, someone who is sitting on a platform in his face, and you say this kind of thing, we need to stop. We're not talking about the other form of corruption, but that is corruption. Mr. Sharif, my question is, again, you can I like it sometimes the way you come with the history. This corruption thing has been with us for a long time. Who are those that are engaged in corruption in our society? What kind of people are these people, and why do they do it?
Yeah, thank you very much, Dennis. And historically, human beings, if for those who believe in faith and in theology, for as long as we have existed as human beings, we've broken covenants, right? So this is in the Bible. It's in different texts, religious texts. We are asked to be grateful to our Creator, but we tend not to be appreciative and grateful to our Creator. We've broken all kinds of covenants. So inherently, you could say that it's something that's within us as human beings, right? So why do we do it, right? So it's in us. But when so when you fast forward, when you come to our own Liberian context, corruption has always, has been around for most of Liberian history, and I guess that's what part of your question touched on, that your admiration for the historical piece, and I do appreciate that very much. So when you look at what was going on in post independent Liberia, for instance, when you look at what was going on in the mid 1900s, for example, in the judicial system, there was no equitable. The judicial system was not equitable. So you have to belong to a certain group, right? So you had those who were in the Masonic, those who were adherents of the Masonic temple, the Masonic lodge, and stuff like that. So justice for them was different. Justice for everyone else was different, and so that has been in existence. So, for example, when Tolbert came into office, one of the things that we know that he did, at least in the latter years of his presidency, was he took on the ritualistic killers of Maryland County. And it was not the ritualistic killing didn't just start in the 70s, right? It had been going on. But what is the reason why there was no penalty? Is because those individuals were very much attached to the president, President Tubman, for example. Some of the leaders of the ritualistic movement were part of the president's inner circle, were part of the president's family. Allen Yance was a close associate, not only a close associate of the president, but he was also a family member of the president. So he was never touched. That is corruption. And so when Tobo came into office and prosecuted them, there was all kinds of lobbying to exonerate them. But Mr. Tobo said no. Mr. Tobo quoted the Bible. He said, if you kill the Lord, it's something like, the wages of sin is death. And so Mr. Tobo stuck to that. Even there was report that one of his own relatives was even executed. So he never wavered in terms of, trying to get corrupted.
Yeah, no, homie, that was his brother.
His brother. Okay, thank you. So he never wavered in trying to get corrupted by the powers that be at the time. And did he pay the price? Yes, of course he did pay the price. So it's not only limited to our financial resources and stuff like that. So what is going on now is a massive corruption, something that we've never seen, almost something that we've never seen before. Broad daylight robbery of the Liberian resources, the meager resources that are needed to develop the country, has been robbed by guys who went into office were very, very poor. They were poor when they went into office. Now, 4 years later, these guys are multi-millionaires. And so corruption, Ahmed and all of the panelists did a good job of defining what corruption is. It's a form of dishonest activity to illegally gain what is not yours, to illegally or inappropriately gain resources intended for the public good. What is the public good? Something that, is reserved for you and myself, for the average citizen, bridges, hospitals, roads and stuff like that. You cannot be able, as Mr. Wesley said, you cannot be able to construct those infrastructures if millions, tens of millions of dollars is going into individual pockets. So it is in individual pockets that these resources are lending. And so it is hurting schools and roads in Calipo, roads and schools in Sino County and other and different parts of the country. So if you see that the underdevelopment of Liberia is discussed over and over and again, and we pretend to be poor people, and I hate to see Liberians come over to the United States. Liberian officials come to the United States, go to France, go to Britain, go to China, go to other countries and borrow money, because Liberia is not supposed to be borrowing. Liberia should never borrow a dime if everything was done right. This is a very wealthy, rich country. It is very rich. So all we need to do, we need to curb corruption. The money that's needed to develop the country is right there in Liberia. If I'm president, I'm not going to borrow a dime because everything is right in there. Everything is in Liberia. So what you have is that public service, Dennis, is very enticing. Everyone and their brother go into public service to get wealthy. In the United States, it's different. Public service is not about wealth. Public service is you going in to make a difference. Dennis, I work in the American public service. I didn't go in with the intent that I'm going to get wealthy. There were other intents for me to get into the public service, right, at the local level. And perhaps Mr. Coney would tell you the same thing. There are individuals. When you look at the United States, you look at what President Biden just did recently. This was part of his campaign promise, right? Student loan, the waiver of student loan debt was part of his campaign promise. Those guys go into public service to make a difference. Obama became wealthy after his presidency. George Bush, some guys were wealthy before they got into the presidency. George Bush was wealthy before he got into the presidency. Some, when they got out of the presidency, they wrote books and they were making speeches. They became wealthy. But in Liberia, we go into the public service to get wealthy. And people get enormously wealthy when they get into the Liberian public service.
Thank you. And even today, people that are rich almost all of them will be current and former government officials.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
let's look at root causes and impact just at one shot. You know, what, and we are discussing corruption in the context of the three government officials that was just sanctioned because of corruption. So that's the kind of public corruption. That's why we are looking at it from that standpoint. And I should mention that there's something on YouTube called super chat. So people that are watching us on YouTube, they are able to donate money. So I think it's Evis, and I put that on the board earlier that Evis say great show, and I'm giving $50 to continue. The $50 that Evis and others give us help us to continue to pay our bills and extend to Liberia. We have reporters now that are bringing you the story to the minute, and I mean, see the work they did with the August 24th celebration. Also, the Fix the Country demonstration. I'm proud of them. So let's talk about corrupt officials, right? Why they do it? What are some of the causes of corruption? Mr. Cooney, I'm coming to you. Looking at, let's say, assuming the three officials are guilty as charged, why they do it and what has been the impact of such robbery on our society and the country? For 2 minutes, just give me something.
Oh, Dennis, let me just speak generally. Mankind is inherently self-centered. We have that tendency. We are self-seeking individuals. We always want to promote our own interests. But to answer your question, the reason why corruption continues to go on in our country, despite all the flowery announcement, the best effort, the establishment of integrity institutions, despite all of that, we still have corruption. I indicated here one time, in criminal justice, there is a theory of crime. I know they call it the economic theory of crime. If the benefit that you derive from committing a crime, if that benefit outweighs the punishment, you will commit the crime because you're deriving more benefit from doing that act. Basically, this theory is linked to impunity. If people continue to do things and they are not held accountable, then they will do it. Liberia is one of the countries where corruption is richly rewarded. Mm-hmm. Once you corrupt, you can become father of the year, you can become mother of the year, you become this patriot, this big person that everybody come to. There is no social embarrassment that you undergo because you wholesome act. The question we should ask ourselves is, all of us here, we're in the diaspora, we're in the public service. What is interesting then is if you observe, Liberians that live here, that can't even, some of them work in a group home. They dare not take the toilet tissue from that group home to carry to their homes. But as soon as they learn to rubber field, RIA, and go into government, the corruption begins. What is the difference? The difference is the benefits there exceed the punishment. Here, if you were to engage in that act, like I'm in public service now, if I were to engage in that act, the punishment that I will receive would be way higher than the benefit. So if you ask me in simple terms, it's only because corruption is profitable in our country.
And Mr. Kune, let me use our root cause analysis on you to say why again. You say corruption happens because it's not punished. Yeah. So I'll go back to you and say why. Why is it not punished by constituted authorities?
Well, the reason why it's not punished then is the whole society is corrupt. I mean, everyone in the society is not corrupt, but most people in the society are corrupt. I mean, you're talking about public officials. Look at any public entity. Look at the schools. Look at the churches. Look at the mosques. See the level of corruption that go in these public institutions. So even the public officials are all product of that environment that promote corruption.
That breeds corruption.
Yeah, so everything is in there. The churches, everywhere you go, the schools. You see, and again, the only thing that distinguishes us from societies that fight corruption is that there is no punishment. The reward is encouraging. The reward
So
is
let's take finance ministry. Let's take a school, for example. So if why would somebody not punish corruption? That was my second why. Because they themselves corrupt. Is that what I'm hearing?
when I was at the agency, there is a theory also. We corruption is like a pyramid. Look, that janitor that is at the agency that is so bold to take things away from the agency. That janitor has a director that back that janitor. That director has somebody hired that back that person, and it go through that layer. Everybody gets somebody that is like a pyramid. It's like a pyramid, and you'll be surprised. This pyramid end at the highest level of government because it can be an assistant minister can be part of that pyramid, a deputy minister can be part of that pyramid, a minister can be part of that pyramid. The executive can the executive marshal can be part of that pyramid. There is something that somebody stay on that give them that confidence that I'm taking this public money and nothing will come out of it. That's something that I one of my papas say that's something that depending where they gotta depend on something. You know?
Miss Washington, same question. The cost and the impact that is having on our society. You can unmute, please. You can unmute, Masa. You are still muted.
Hello?
Yeah, all right, go ahead.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yes.
So, okay, so I said earlier, I made a comparison of, with corruption to the octopus that has its tentacles deeply rooted in all facets of the Liberian society. That's corruption for you. And, for several reasons, other colleagues, especially Wilmer, he did a fantastic job trying to break down the different reasons why and, and types of corruption, the reasons why. But I think one of the reasons why also is that men, besides men being inherently corrupt, is that greed to always be the first, to always be ahead of everybody else. Some people sometimes you don't mind other people getting something, but as long as they get the crumbs, and then you have you get the best. And we have this syndrome in our society. I always say that this big man in Africa syndrome, where by the time you get elevated a little bit, whether through education or you get some fat job or whatsoever, all of a sudden you become a big man in Africa passing around. You have people who, you got a driver, you have people who would be holding your hand grip, you have a houseboy, you have someone who can run and get your food from the restaurant for you. So you surround yourself with all these people, most of the time, people who are completely not your parallel, meaning that they are not at your level, so they will not be able to check you or to try to, or give you good counsel. So you surround yourself by all these people, these other people who consider themselves inferior. They feel inferior to you, and so you can be the big man over them. And then Kuni made a very good example about the janitor in the office engaging in little acts of corruption, but nothing is happening to him because the boss man is probably supporting him. In some cases,
And
the boss
Masa,
man may not be directly.
Masa Kuni, the old policeman, so he have seen a lot.
Yeah, yeah, but you see, in some cases, the boss may not be directly supporting the person, but it's because the person sees the boss being so corrupt himself. Okay, he sees the boss being so corrupt. He knows that, you know what, I can do whatever I want. Also, because he's way up there, and he's getting the lion's share of this corruption thing. I'm way down. I'm only getting peanuts. I can feel free to do whatever I want because he's not going to bother me, because he knows I know where the bodies are buried. So public officials compromise themselves in those kinds of ways and make themselves weak. So now they cannot effectively or implement policies to stop corruption or to address corruption. And one of the reasons to poverty, most of our people are poor. Like, a lot of our people, they're poor, they are poor, the war
And
have
they
made
are
them even
poor
poor.
sometimes because of corruption. So it's like the chicken
Yes,
and the egg.
exactly. Yeah, exactly. But then they come to public office, they're very poor, and they come to public office and they want to make sure they will never be poor again. So, they sit down, they high five each other, they
Mm.
shake their beer glasses and stuff, my man. That you time will got to make sure when you leave from there, you be poor again, that won't buy on you. You're not say God bless you that you time. So, this acute poverty with our people not wanting to remain in poverty and all of that. But then also for I kind of think also is this uncontrolled longing for material wealth, to be better than everybody else, to have everything, the gluttony, the greed, and what have you. But Kune struck a very important point when he mentioned the issue of impunity. Because of the ingrained culture of impunity in our society, people can do any. I mean, people have murdered people, people have massacred people all over the place, and they actually come back and people roll out the red carpet for them. So
Yeah.
you think somebody who just stealing $50,000 or $100,000, do you think that person think that anything will happen to them? First thing they can sit down and say, well, at least I'm only stealing money. Look at the other people who murder people. Families are passing around, calling them name, pointing fingers. They were involved in Carter Camp massacre, Lutheran Church massacre, Tupelo massacre, Beaumont's massacre. And they're passing around, they are the leaders, they're all millionaires and whatsoever. And the lack of impunity to address corruption and the lack of political goodwill to address corruption. For example, I would just give an example on the Ellen Johnson Sirleaf administration. The reason I'm giving an example of her administration is that she, I think, not only maintained that way, but I think a lot of people thought that she was best positioned to really help Liberia break this unholy gridlock that is corruption that it has on the country. And unfortunately, that opportunity was missed. But under Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, because of all the corruption that was taking place, she came up with so many, there were so many commissions. The John Modu, the GAC audit that came out report, nothing happened. The Elwood Dunn Commission report, nothing happened. The Global Witness report that eventually saw Vani Sherman get in trouble, that talk about Big Ball 1, Big Ball 2, with Big Ball 1 and 2 with Alex Tyler and the rest of them.
Yeah.
That report came up, nothing happened. The Nibali Warner extractive commodity report, nothing happened.
Yeah.
The
Carbon
Dama
credit.
Jada Commission report on the private use of permits, nothing happened. The Tier 1 Gongle Commission report, nothing happened. Dr. H. Brahma Famula Commission report, nothing happened. The Moore Stevenson audit report on the contracts and concession that took place. For example, the Moore Stevenson report said that there were 68 contracts that were signed, that were contractors out and signed, agreed during that time. Out of the 68, only 2 were found to be in compliance. The rest of them was nothing but DD by corruption. Okay, it was the stinking report, it was Demi report, Global Witness pick it up, the international community pick up, they went with it. Only Vani Sherman and people that Sherman got in trouble, he got in the sanction list, nothing happened. Okay, so you have all these, all these reports coming out that were all these commissions coming over the report, commissions that were commissioned by the president office to say, well, you know what, we want to address corruption, go ahead and investigate what happened. And all these different commissions came out, they investigated, not to forget the TRC as well. The TRC had a robust economic crime a component. It was the first TRC in the world that really focused on economic crimes. We have a whole economic crime section. And we know very well that economic crime is a catalyst for war crime, because during the war, they were using people as slave labor. They killed some people because they gave people their loads and the loot, for example, to war from Lofa County all the way to Guinea. And when people were falling by the wayside, they couldn't make it, they got killed. It was all economically driven. So you have the president who is saying to the international community, I want to break this chain of corruption. I want to do something about corruption, and then establish all these different commissions. But then when the commissions come out and give their final report, nothing happened. All these reports are still sitting on the, on collecting dust, sitting on the fence collecting dust. So the lack of political goodwill to address the issue of corruption and this impunity that Kuni talked about is, are just two of the numerous reasons why corruption, it looked like it's not going to leave us anytime soon.
Thank you so much. Mr. Salif, there was I heard a story of two guys and someone who was visually impaired were eating grapes. So while they were eating the grapes, they made a rule that we should take one grape at a time. So that's what they were doing. This guy can see. So they are taking the grape one at a time. Later on, the guy who is blind started taking two. Nobody talked. He started taking three. Nobody talked. Four. He went to five. So nobody talked. Then he held the hands of those guys that could see. He said, "You stop cheating me." They said, "But what are you talking?" He said, "If I, who I'm blind, if I'm taking five and nobody talking, I know you're taking 10."
Yeah.
So, Mr. Salim, so we're talking about cost here. And then I want you and Mr. Wesley to give me effect also.
Oh.
So because of this corruption, this guy taking 10, so you know already that Jimenez really stealing more than he does.
Yeah.
And I'm going to Mr. Kuni's point. So the causes, but let's talk more about the impact that it's having on all of us, on our country, on our future.
Yes, no, I like your story. I heard a similar corruption story as well. Maybe I can quickly state it. Raila Odinga was speaking one time. He came to Washington and he said there was a story about two corrupt officials, one from Indonesia, one from Nigeria. So the Nigerian Indonesian government engaged in some bilateral cooperation, and the Nigerian official went to Indonesia to visit his counterpart. When he went to Indonesia, they picked him up in the Mercedes. They brought him to a very beautiful compound, threw a party for him. So he asked the Nigerian asked the Indonesian, "How you live a beautiful life? How you got all this?" He said, "That contract, 10%. The Nigerian said, "Oh, okay." And then the Indonesian comes to Nigeria. He has 10 Mercedes pick him up, a whole convoy. He's put in a resort. It's more expensive than you ever seen. And then an evening, there was this lavish party for him. So he asked the Nigerian counterpart, "This is all yours? Is this why?" He said, "Yeah, that contract, 90%." 90%. So the Nigerian said 90% is in here. The Indonesian said 10% was in his, right? So, we're laughing about it, but serious. Recently I read a UN report on how corruption is undermining the SDG, I think 7. I'm trying to remember exactly. And they talk about some $1.2 trillion in corruption. And mostly they talk about societies that have broken down in rule of law. And I think there was a reference that Commissioner Washington kind of alluded to that corruption begets poverty and poverty begets corruption, right? So that there's this vicious cycle. So a society gets so enamored in corruption and gets inundated by corruption, the society then begins to be corrupt itself. And then that corruption, the fact that the society itself is corrupt, and because individual members of society make society, those elements too become very corrupt. And so it's a vicious cycle. Corruption is producing poverty. So too is poverty, like Commissioner Washington was saying. Poverty is then somebody who is poor, who's never experienced this kind of really nice life, and so on. They've seen others who've been corrupt, engaging in such public pillage and plunder. They aspire for such life for themselves. In our case in Liberia, I think the most prestigious position or office that somebody can hold is a government office. Everybody wants to be representative. Everybody wants to be senator. Why? Because there's corruption there with impunity. People openly steal, engage in theft, public theft, open theft. In fact, they legalize theft. They put in the budget, and they justify that it's in budget. Look, corruption undermines growth of the country. That's just it. It undermines everything. You can name basic services all you want. You can name education. You can name health. But Liberia will never become a middle-income country unless we've changed all kinds of things. We can begin to describe the symptoms of corruption without really peeling it off, right? We can say, oh, well, cronyism. You hire, you let a representative today, you bring your girlfriend's sister, your cousin, your nephews and nieces, your own relatives. Okay, that's cronyism, that's corruption. You lobby some kind of public official to engage in some illegal procurement. That's corruption. There's so many names to it. Bottom line, then is corruption kills. I think it was P.R. Lumumba of Kenya, this African Pan-Africanist who speaks around, who talks about, I don't know the exact quote, but I don't remember the exact quote, but that corruption probably has killed more Africans than civil wars that we fought on the continent itself, right?
Yeah.
So that, what does that tell you? That tells you that we have a serious problem on our hands. We can describe the symptoms because what we see is what we talk about. And look, mind you, corruption affects even the families around individual corrupt persons, right? You take sanction, for instance, you sanction an individual, you sanction the whole village, you sanction their spouse, you sanction their in-laws, there's ridicule, there's shame, there's the disgrace of those individuals, there's disgrace of the society. So that's what corruption does. It kills children, it kills pregnant women who go give birth, but because there's no proper hospital, there's no proper prenatal care, because some individual who has access to budget, who is close to budget, who has access to public resources, has decided to appropriate those for themselves. They take it for themselves. The bosses above them they see the bosses taking it, so the bosses pass the crumbs down to them, and then the biggest boss, also authorizes. So it's a problem. It's a problem to the extent that we legalize it by corrupting rule of law itself.
Yeah.
Because if you amend your constitution or you amend the LNCC law to make it more corrupt, you legalize corruption. Pray tell me, how are you going to get out of that? That is the law.
And the turn around and say, prove it if I stole.
You say I've stolen. Okay, so if you've accused me of stealing, just prove it. So if I can hide my corruption, then I'm not corrupt. That's my argument. But look, this is not we can dance around it. We've killed people in April, after the April 12 coup. We killed how many of our officials are some of our talented Liberians. We've killed over 250,000 people as a result of corruption. Today, people continue to die. Our children continue to be stranded around the world. They're looking for greener pasture because of corruption, Dennis. So corruption is what has gotten our country and a lot of our people in the abject state in which they find themselves. It's because of corruption we don't have electricity at the airport. Plane landing is a problem. Electricity on the highway from the airport to the city. We do not have power to run light manufacturing, to open up the economy, to create jobs and businesses, to attract investors. Corruption kills a country. It kills a people. So, we could name the effects of corruption, the impact of corruption, all evening long, and the list will still be inexhaustible.
Mr. Wesley, cause a effect. And before you do that, I want to read a little poem. It's a prayer. Well, in 2018, this guy wrote this and he called it the Bro Juice Prayer. He said, Our Father in heaven, hallowed be thy name. May your kingdom come. Let your will be done in Liberia, even halfway as it is in heaven. Teach us this day how to love and work hard. Wean us off of foreign aid and dependency. And forgive us our debts and bad habits, but punish those who stole the little we own or borrow. For that is wickedness on the part of the powerful, seeking glory and wealth on our backs forever and ever. Amen. This is 218 when I wrote what I call the Blow Juice Prayer. And I'm still praying. My prayer is not being answered, Wesley. What's going on here? What's the impact?
We're still on Esau.
we will still answer. The corruption we have is a result of the breaking down of all of our social institutions. We're no longer talking about civics that tells us how to be good citizens and how to be responsible citizens. The church that should be the epicenter of morality is condoning corruption because it's in the very church, like Mr. Coney was saying, that we ordain fathers of the year, irrespective of how they acquire their wealth. Our social institutions, had they risen to the occasion as in the days of Michael Bacala Francis, who would squarely tell his congregation that you don't steal from the poor and come in church with a sense of pomposity. That the little social club in the community will not invite you with the hope that what they know your salary cannot afford, they expect you to deliver at a rally, at a program they organize. Dennis, you smiling. That's how people get corrupt.
Yeah, I still
As
in
I
the church.
almost alluded to that point, that the moment one gets a little government job and somebody is there to carry his grip, the next person is driving him around, he will start being swollen headed. And as he becomes swollen headed, he will try to live an unusual, dishonest, irresponsible, and mischievous life. So our people aid and abet the commission of corruption, which in effect, like Ahmed was just saying, we ordain the corruption turn against us, and then we become victimized. I tell you something, listening to my colleagues, there are three things responsible for the permeation of corruption: the lack of respect for the rule of law, the lack of political will, and scrapping the code of conduct. The first thing in the land called Liberia that we need is the political will. The absence of that political will gives people licenses to indiscriminately loot, plunder, and pillage because no one is going to come after them. And the political will that should ensure that the GSC does our work without any interference, that the judiciary is there to ensure that justice will be done to all and not some, because that's what we've had in recent times, selective justice. You remember the incident with Judy Bryant? Of course, if Judy Bryant committed any offense, he should be held accountable. But beyond Judy Bryant, John Muller's GSC submitted tons and tons of audit report. One of the most culpable institutions of state aiding and abetting corruption is the first bench of government. It is where you see people going and making insertion into budget lines at various ministries and agencies only for the purpose of stealing.
Yeah.
There is, you said, my good friend Tiawan says, stealing. That when the budget is passed, the same people on capital bidding end up in the ministries and agencies chasing the budget line in order to get their cut. That is not fair. So the lack of political will, the first bench of government, the direct representative of the people, are against the interests of the people in terms of the legislation. Where are we? Where are we? There's something fundamentally wrong.
Yeah.
And until we can address that, I mean, going back and forth, I will have to borrow that little prayer from you and factor it revolutionarily, you know. I love the prayer. Too many dishonest people. Just the other day, we were a show that one ball loves the country. But how we feeling? How we feeling the impact of that law for country when the Americans just sanctioned 3 of your ministers? Is that how we show love? No, we don't show love like that because the minister shows up in Banga and it's justifying that yesterday there were looters, today we continue to loot, but at the same time we give you crumbs. But who was aiding the minister while he was speaking? The masses. They were cheering the ministers on because the minister had carried bags of local Liberian currency that will be dishing out to them. You don't blame the masses. The masses are conditioned by the circumstances that is informing their cheering. And until we can have the political will, until we can have an independent legislature that is not rubber stamped, until we can have a judiciary that will interpret the law irrespective of whoever the politician sitting across the row, we are doomed. All this will not be saying it. We are having a conversation because our good friends have sanctioned 3 people who have been looting and looting and looting. And because they have been restricted, we are elevating the discussion. Like the ambassador said, seize the moment. We are seizing the moment. We'll continue to play this role, but at the same time, until that political will becomes forthcoming, until we have an irresponsible first bench of government, until we have an independent judiciary, this conversation will just be as good as not having one.
Thank you. And Mr. Sharif, it's sometimes hard to really put a finger as you continue to ask more why, and why. Because these people are corrupt. Take, for instance, the 3 sanctioned individuals, starting with Mr. Nathaniel McGill, and the church, and I want to remember my church this now and say, hey, the law commission Ezekiel, he said, I appoint you as a watchman of the city, so as to blow the trumpet if you see danger coming. So if you don't blow the trumpet and danger comes, the blood of the people is on your head. Let's see what's happening here.
The prayer, 1, for him, 2, for the President of the Republic of Liberia. Let there be a transfer of it. Reverend?
Amen. We are again glad that we can come around to pray for our brother, our son, our uncle. Amen. Amen. If I may, let me ask Pastor Jerry and Pastor Fire to lead this section. Point your hands.
Yes, yeah, and just touch, and your hand can reach.
Right.
The only thing I see in that video is Mr. McGill being prayed for, but he looks so frightened, like something is going to happen to him. So now here we have the church people. This man has been accused of corruption. He's being sanctioned by the U.S. He's being suspended by his boss. And the church say, hey, let's pray for him to strengthen him. Meanwhile, we saw student Christopher Walter Civilly, who was brutalized, bleeding from his mouth and everywhere. He was not prayed for by this same group. We saw all the rape victims as young as babies in diapers. No prayer. Now they say this man is sanctioned for stealing, and we are there praying. And sometimes we say, well, it is the circle. They've been, as Mr. Wesley said, they've been conditioned this way. If the people in South Africa were conditioned the same way, we still have apartheid. If the blacks in America were conditioned just to go with it because people put them under that, What are we doing in Liberia that the ordinary man continuing to look at those who victimize them as the Lord? We create these golden images of our leaders. Now, when they start to we worship them. When they start to demand our children has burnt offerings and sacrifices before we start to complain. Tell me about this whole effect and how we, the people, are, in the words of Mr. Wesley, aiding, abetting this criminal behavior.
Yeah, I mean, we are no stranger to this, Dennis. On this very platform, some months ago, maybe a year now, I was on this platform criticizing the president of the Republic of Liberia, George Weah. And what did I get? I get from good friends, some colleagues on this platform who challenged me to show the proof. Jimmy Eastman said, do you have any proof that this president is corrupt? Do you have any proof that this administration is corrupt? Mr. Sharif, what have you done for Liberia? And all of this and that and the other. So you have people who are acquiescing to the danger of corruption, people who are acquiescing to robbery, people who are acquiescing to thieves, they're bowing to these thieves. And, my brother Wilmer on here is a major supporter of the CDC. Now, it is time now to, after this beautiful analysis, it is time to say, if you don't fix up, if you don't put your acts together, I am not going to support you in 2023. Can he do that? That is the question. He is not willing to do that. So by not doing that, he is acquiescing to all of what's going on. As far as George Weah's robbery of the country, how many times I have come on this platform to say that we are in danger territory, right? When the president, no sooner did he take office, the president was building real estates all over the place. It was like a kid, when he saw, he went into the presidency, it was like a kid running into the candy store wanting everything. And so that's what the president has done. And of course, when the leader set that agenda, the agenda of corruption, the agenda of impunity that you all have beautifully talked about. So what are the minions going to do? They are going to follow, right? Because the president has set the agenda. Then the presidency is the most important position in Liberia. The president is the head of state. The president is the commander in chief of the armed forces. The president is we currently the president as the father of the nation and stuff like that. If it's a male, he's in the days of Ellen, it was, she's her mother. George Weah now is the father. So, talking about others, talk about they were the father. So the presidency is so important. And so this president, the agenda that this president set from the get-go is that he is going to go ahead and steal all of the money. And he did that very successfully. And there's those of us who continue to support him regardless. And that is my question. Why are you supporting this regime that continues to ransack the Liberian Liberia of resources, rob the country of resources? So what you see the church doing, the church, these religious institutions, Dennis, are no different from us. We are part of these religious institutions. So what you saw them doing is just goes to show you that outside of the church, the same people who go to church are the same people out there that Miguel was speaking to 3 weeks ago when he went to Bon County, when he said, but the people say we steal, but I'm not building homes in the United States. I'm not building homes elsewhere. I'm building these homes right here. So what did you see? Mr. Wesley said, what did you see? You saw the same people gravitating towards this person who has admitted that he is stealing money. So as long as we are doing that, we're in for a long, long haul. There's another thing. Independent judiciary. Wesley said, we need an independent judiciary. How about incorruptible judiciary? How about incorruptible legislature? We don't have a legislature that is not corrupt. The legislature is corrupt. A lot of these guys, more than half of them, maybe 75% of them, these guys are corrupt. What have we talked about here? We've talked about the brown envelopes. We've talked about that a lot. So the judiciary, besides us looking for independent judiciary, we need a judiciary that's incorruptible. We need a legislature that's incorruptible. We don't have that. We don't have, the person in the mansion. We already know his record. So where do we go for, where do we go for respite? We should be going to the legislature to make laws. Well, they're also corrupt. We should be going to the judiciary for some kind of enforcement. Well, they're also corrupt. They're in the pocket of the president, the very, very corrupt president. So it's not just, those three guys that were sanctioned now that are corrupt. There are hundreds in government, if not thousands in government, that are also corrupt. They're just picked to make example of them, but they're not the only corrupt individuals. And so one last thing I want to say about that is that as long as we as a people are not taking action and we're depending on, foreign governments to do it for us, it is not going to work. So the Liberian people now, as we are talking, Dennis, where is the opposition to all of this? I saw the university students, in their fix the country protest, but where is the opposition? So all they can do is to somehow coalesce under the banner of the students, because they can't organize their own. They cannot organize their own. Where are the leading opposition candidates now who are supposed to be calling the country to see reason to come out from Cape Palmas to Cape Mount, from Lofa County, from Sanicoli, to Vonjama? Protests all over the place until something is done about corruption. Corruption is just something that we're talking about now. There are a whole host of other issues. There are a whole host of things that are going on in Liberia that, when you begin to enumerate, you spend all day. I'm glad that, once the Americans came out, those people who were asking for, for evidence, where is your evidence? I wonder why they're not responding to the Americans now. I wonder where they are. So, again, this is a disturbing illustration of what goes on in Liberia. We support these individuals even if they do the worst. They commit the worst, we continue to support them. What did they say after the war? You kill my pa, you kill my ma, I will vote for you. So you know what? George West doing all of this, he knows something. He knows something. Maybe he knows the Liberian psyche. They're going to go out there and vote for him regardless of what he does.
Thank you, Mr. Sheriff. That turns us to our last point, which is what can we do? We want to find solutions. Each of us, Mr. Wesley, Mr. Sherry, Miss Washington, all of us, each of us has a role to play. The separate three branches of government, each branch has a role to play. Our institutions, churches, mosques, traditional societies, academic institutions, all of us. What do we do here? Let me start with Mr. Kunin this time. You can just pick anyone, being it individual, being it the judiciary, being it our schools, anything. Tell me, what can we do? What role can we play in curbing, if not eradicating, corruption totally?
Well, Dennis, we talking about corruption with specific reference to political corruption. And it is people that in the political arena that have the power to influence us one way or the other. They are the one that can make laws. They are the one that can give policies and other things. We've suggested several things that can be done here that will discourage individuals in public service from stealing public money or from being corrupt or making it difficult being corrupt. For example, we talk about the asset declaration. I mean, this should not just be a one-time gesture by some good-thinking president. This should be a law. It should be mandatory. And assets should be published. Assets should be investigated as to the truthfulness of the one making the declaration. And as long as you remain in office, your assets should be investigated. And we have to change the corruption laws in our country. You can say we charge a man for corruption, you're going to prove me guilty. Let us institute asset justification. While you are in public office, can you justify how you acquire these things? These are some of the things that legislatures and other bodies can put together. But unfortunately, these things are not happening. You see, look, my debut on the show was actually my resentment towards presidential powers, because I believe that in a democracy, power is dispersed at other centers, and our society should reach a point where things can be done whether the president agrees with it or not, once it is done within the confines of our system of governance. This worship of the president that we've accepted, that nothing should move in our country until the president say it goes, is something that I've always opposed, because I've recognized centers of powers. So, for example, you have the national legislature. I agree the presidency is very important. Is the most powerful in the society. But can we not take our society to a point where, you know what, we can bring the president to a check? We see the legislature continuously making laws that keep giving more deference to the presidency. Yesterday was the LAC law, the corruption law, which the president, information is that the president only wanted prosecutorial powers. Our legislature inserted other things into the law. Now we're hearing they're moving to the electoral laws. The electoral laws, these are the bodies. And, you know, my brother said, disavow the support for George Weah. I've said that so many times to many friends. I've heard the call from so many politicians to change president solely on corruption. And when that president changed, corruption has never changed in our country. So that argument don't sway me anymore. I've seen 5 presidents change in my lifetime. And it was the same thing. We're going to get rid of corruption. The opposition you're talking about, like you already said, what is the plan coming from the opposition to fight corruption in Liberia? It looked like the opposition want to be a sitting down to inherit the system so that Liberia can remain the same again, as it has been in the change of the several presidents that I have seen in my lifetime. So I'm not willing to be enlisted to just change a president. You want to change a system? Make the argument. To change a system takes time. But every time we think that there is somebody that is coming to the rescue, all the person wants is president. The system remain unchanged. The people, look, we let me get that. We missed out a good opportunity after the war. Nothing was put into place by either politicians, by civil society to desensitize the citizenry, to teach people with regard to their civic responsibility, their political responsibility, to build consciousness. So politicians inherited the society the way they inherited. So politicians are playing the society the way it is. There is no meaningful program there to really give consciousness to the Liberian masses. And I sometimes talk about my Moja days, people call it nostalgia. I didn't know anything, but there was a systematic program of conscious building that took place that made me to know the forces in society and what decisions to make. Right now, anybody appearing on the scene, the only thing they want, they think that they can solve the problem of Liberia by being president. I've seen 5 presidents change that way. The corruption, we're still talking about it. So this is why that appeal is not making an impact on me. I'm looking for an argument to change a whole system, to change the orientation of a society so that we can move to a better level. Not to change a president, after the president changed, then we keep complaining about legislature, we keep complaining about judiciary. I'm not interested in that kind of change.
Thank you, Mr. Coney. Let me go to Mr. Wesley as to the role each of these groups and individual can play in minimizing or curbing or killing this corruption thing altogether.
There is, I saw you left a photo of a group of religious folks in Banga trying to pray for the suspended Minister of State for Presidential Affairs, Nat McGill. You know, Alan Alan Bosak, if you remember the name, and I think you read our book while we're in Nigeria, Dennis. If this is treason, I'm guilty, written by the Reverend Dr. Alan Bosak. He used to be head of the Dutch Reformed Church in racist South Africa. A sub-topic in that book sought to discuss the church. The white-dominated churches were given an impression that apartheid was ordained by God. And in his counter to them, he said the church is the church of this world, and the church must minister the gospel in truth and in spirit. Today, we are saddened by the fact that neither the church nor the mosque is ministering the gospel or the scriptures contained in the Quran in truth and in spirit to our political leader. The mosque, the church, these are the consciences of society, the moral authority. If they can't speak, the politician will have a free day as they are doing. This should not be the case. It is unfortunate. You gave us a classic allegory. Christopher Walter Sisulu Seville, brutalized, is dying where he needs God's intervention, and the church is not offering prayers. But the church is offering prayers to somebody who, in his own immorality, is disenfranchising thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people because of the loot, the plunder, and the pillage. That is unfortunate. The church should not be at the center of such things. Somebody will come this evening and quote a scripture to say, touch not my anointed, judge not this, judge not that.
Do my prophet no harm.
Do my prophet no harm. This is not about. We live in the real world. This is not about prophet being done any harm. This is not about judging people. The reality is that in the midst of immorality, that the church will side with immorality, it is unfortunate. Look, Dennis, those folks we sent on Capitol Hill through our votes are the most disastrous environment we have in our national democracy. They have become a complete opposite of the representation of the people. They are no longer the voices of the people, simply because during campaign time they said they spend their money and they pay their way to get to Capitol Hill. And so all we see is a total act of nonchalance, irresponsibility, and a neglect of the constituents who sent them there. So their actions is not informed by the interests of the people, rather their actions are informed by their bellies and the ego associated thereof. The judiciary. We will not be singing this. We will not be singing this song about why is it we haven't arrived. If we had a credible judiciary that will not waver if the executive sneezes, and in that same token, where the executive lacks the political will to go after people whose hands are in the cookie jar, when in fact the executives' very hands are in the cookie jar. In effect, we are fighting the war that we cannot win because we got square pegs in a round hole. The change we spoke about yesterday has come, but that change is not because we want to better the lives of the ordinary people. And that is saddening, it is sickening.
Ms. Washington?
hear you.
You're muted, Massa. Can you unmute yourself, please?
Oh, you have me muted. You always muting me, my man.
No, no, you're not on the other show.
But you always muting me. I'm just trying to be silver. I don't want to play the the feminine card here, but you always muting me. But anyway,
No, there
so
was background noise, so
yeah. So
grinding.
the first point I want to make here is that I just want to state, Wilmon, you made a point earlier when you were speaking that unfortunately after the war, the way things went, that the politicians unfortunately inherited some of what is happening now. I just want to disagree with that just very briefly and politely, because I was there. I attended a lot of the press conferences whose aftermath introduce this political dispensation that we see now. And politicians, I think everybody who were at the forefront of those meetings and negotiations, I think people again were selfish. People were focusing more on their own self-survival. People had come from war. Everybody was poor. People were, kind of figuring where they fit politically. So we saw politicians, crossing carpet to war laws, giving war laws the red carpet at peace conferences because they want to ensure that, if war laws found themselves in the corridor of power, that they were not going to be left at the wayside. So the way our so-called politicians handle those peace conferences in the governance system of Liberia, that's the after effect that we're experiencing today. So let me just move on. Okay, so I listened to everybody, and in the first place, one of the problems that we have today that we need to correct is that our so-called integrated institutions, we have some laws on the books that will protect the Liberian people against corruption and poverty and what have you, but they are not being enforced. One of the reasons is that I have a problem with some of our integrated institutions. Like, for example, the governance commission, when Dr. Sawyer was there were times where the governance commissions refused to implement certain policy because Dr. Sawyer was, for the sake of peace, people just coming from war. If you do this, if you do that, we could risk, going back to conflict, all that kind of stuff. So certain things that they were supposed to enforce, like the code of conduct, they were very relaxed on the code of conduct. They didn't do anything about the code of conduct. Then you have the election commission. Okay, the election commission there, I remember having this discussion with Jimmy Moyan, but not very in depth because we met in the public sphere at some public occasion. I was telling him, I said, my man, I said, this election commission again has sat down and cleared everybody to contest the presidency, including George Dwyer, Prince Johnson, and all these other people, and including even people who were U.S. citizens who went back, who people saw their passport. They had U.S. passport. And our constitution said they were not eligible to contest any election. But the election commission sat there and let them slip by, and they were all for the sake of peace. Oh, we're just coming from war. We can't disenfranchise any citizen. If they had started enforcing the laws that we have on the books from the beginning, while at the same time instituting new laws to strengthen the already existing laws, I don't think we would have been where we are today. But people, as usual, they just did business as usual. They didn't exercise due diligence in the governance or system of the country coming from war. And so anything you don't do right, my late father used to say, anything you don't do right, you may think that you've gotten away with it after some time. It looks working, but after a while, it comes back and slap you in the face. Anything you don't do right, it would never have a positive or impact. In the end, it will always go haywire, and this is where Liberia is. And then also, this national legislature. Now I know the executive has a responsibility to the country, but this national legislature is the first branch of government. These people have the power and the authority to go through the budget, to decide where funding should be redirected. But instead of that, you have a legislature that actually concede its authority to a large extent to the executive. you know, and look at the kind of people that go into the legislature. We need to educate our people. Education. Mohammed said before on one previous show, education. This I was seeing Mohammed Sharif. Education, and it stuck with me. We need to really educate our people as to the kind of people they are voting into the legislature. For example, it's a bizarre story, but it's very true. I am friends with the brother of a legislator who is there, who is, can I read and write? Nothing but just dressing, going to section, and she keeps being re-elected into office. This brother was telling me, every time he sees me, he will joke. He said, Massa, my sister, whole day, she can sit down in Liberia, she going to Guinea, she going to Mali, she going to all places, she going to her medicine people, her juju people. She is convinced that the juju that she's collecting from around the sub-region is what is keeping her in office. Because you know what? She cannot read and write, she's illiterate. She doesn't understand any of these things that are going on, the concession agreement, the budget. She can't read. She doesn't even know her own name. She can't read. So you got this kind of person there representing you. How is she going to advocate for you? How is she going to deliberate on the budget? How is she going to question, you know, why we don't have enough budgetary allotment going to, for example, health? How is she going to question any of these things? So what does she do? She really thinks that the juju and think, you know, every time he see me, I say, my man, your sister in Liberia, he says she's going to Mali, you know, it's become a joke among us now. So this is the kind of legislator what we have because our people are voting in the kind. Don't forget, most of our people are not educated too. They don't understand the things. They don't have the sophistication. Most of them are poor, so they're kind of thinking, if I vote all my friends then from Yukutan, if I vote all my friends then from behind grassroots cinema, Oro, if I vote all these people who are poor like me, even though they got no clue, when they get there, they will remember me because you know what, we are the same. No, but it doesn't happen. Look at Representative 4, you eat, you chop, I chop. Look at the other representative who now say he's a reverend, he making the or what the thing that he making or African movies and all of that. These are the people who are representing our people. Our people are putting their kind there. But unfortunately, when they get there, you know, like somebody made a comment the other day that I didn't sign a contract with poverty. And I absolutely agree with that comment. In fact, I love that comment. None of us here on this forum signed any contract with poverty. So I don't think it was a wrong comment. But what it does is that it begs the question. It says how serious our situation is. So we need to really, really educate our people in the simplest form, in the simpler manner to stop voting in, you know, the kind of people that they think will represent them. Because if these people, for example, like this, this lady I'm talking about, she got no clue. How is she going to properly represent you to make sure that the district that she comes from will be able to get what it needs through central government if this woman has no clue? Just dressing
you were voting the name, Martha, of this woman?
Huh?
Are you voting the name of this woman?
What?
Tough talking, call a name.
No, I'm not calling name, but it's just ridiculous. This is a true story. Her brother is a very good colleague of mine. We went to LU together. It's a true story. Every time he see me, he say, "Mas, you know, that our people them will, you know, my brother who really educated, who will do something, you put him there, but they put our sister there." And you know, every time I see him now, we will just joke and make fun. Say, "Where is she now?" He says he said maybe she's going to Mali or maybe she's going to Guinea. So this is the kind of mindset you have of people who are, you know, our legislature who are representing us. So the Liberian people, a lot of it also rests upon their shoulders, especially public office that has to do with the legislature, where people are actually voting for them. We need to sensitize our people. Say, yeah, we understand that the people come from you, so and so, but guess what? They don't have the know-how, they don't have the political goodwill, they don't have the sophistication. They get there. The other criminals who are a little bit educated, they can manipulate other them as long as they show them a brown envelope, they manipulate them and they just sit down, they just sign, just say, oh, sign it, my man, sign it, and let your own team sign it. And somebody who can read or write, just go and sign. Next thing you know, your whole birthright, they finish signing away your birthright. But then in the meantime, this is a representative. And this person has been in the parliament for a second term. And looks like she's going to go a third term.
So that rule out, the president is not from the Senate. So we are getting closer. We're talking about the role each of us have to play, right? There are some professionals that are writing books. Like, take for instance, Dr. Robtel Nije Pele wrote about Baba, and this is all about corruption. you know, and I believe these things should be taught in schools. Mr. Sharif, let's talk more about the role each of these people have to play. I know you are quoting scripture, about because
Yeah.
because your education at Bishop Jubilee High. That's why you're using here tonight.
Yeah, so the role each has to play is important, as individual components, individual citizens of the Liberian nation state. One of the things that we're doing right now is a patriotic duty to country. And that's why I always say if these people are listening, if they were even listening half of the time to this show, to this platform, the embarrassment that they faced recently would never have happened, perhaps. But they're not listening, right? Even if they're listening halfway, and they go around saying, "Oh, don't model guys, they're not working in government. That's the reason why." Don't mind that lady talking like that. She's not working in government. That's why. But a real patriot, Dennis, there's no patriot, right? A real patriot would take into consideration the views of the citizenry, will listen, will keep their ears to the ground, will keep up to date with developments. But what is going on is that this president is not intellectually, and his minions are not intellectually equipped to tackle the broad issues facing the Liberian nation state. So even though we are sitting here performing our patriotic duty, but he's not paying attention. He's not writing any of this down. He's not even listening to it. And therefore, things are allowed to fester. So as individuals, one of the things, again, this is our, we're playing our part. Another thing that we can do is to begin to make our legislators work for us. The legislators are not working for us. I have always said the term of the legislature is so long. You have a senator sitting there for 9 years. This is unacceptable. You have a representative for 6 years. The presidential term is 6 years, right? That is too long. That is extremely long. One of the things that people tend to overlook is that the frequency of election is also a way of holding these people accountable. So let's just say it's every 4 years, right? And if George Weah knows that in the next 4 years he has something coming for him, maybe that will be at the back of his mind and he would do some things differently. If Prince Johnson knows that, in the next 4 years he's up for re-election, then maybe he's going to do something different. I'm just saying, right? But look, you elect Mohammed Sharif, and Mohammed Sharif is going to sit there for 9 years, and then God forbid he's elected again for another 9 years. That's 18 years. That's the life of a child who will be born today and finish high school while that corrupt senator is still sitting there. So that is unacceptable. So one of the things that collectively we can do is to ensure that this term, however way this can be done, is to ensure that the term of office is reduced, right? When this was proposed, this very opposition campaigned against it. And this is why I believe that the opposition has not proven to me that they are a viable alternative to the corrupt administration that we have now. So we each have a role. You mentioned the churches, you mentioned the mass, the masjids and stuff like that. The religious leaders have a role to play in this. But if you see the religious leaders who have their role to play are now acquiescing to the corrupt politicians, then we're in for trouble. We are in for some real trouble. I mean, neighboring Sierra Leone, you know, does not have half of the problem that this very old republic has. This very old republic has nothing to show for being so old, for being 175 years old. And somehow, some way, the Liberian people are content with this. It's a minority, and we are in a minority that take on this patriotic duty to talk about these things. And therein lies the tragedy that's facing the Liberian nation state.
Thank you, Mr. Sharif. We're going to take a short break. When we come back, we go to our Tabata session. Every day, every week, there is some Tabata going on. So let's take a short break and we'll be Welcome back to Tough Talking Thursday. This is where we talk tough and there is no room for any form of tabata. Well, we will go into that section of tabata this time. Where's Mr. Kuni? Let's start with Muhammad. Muhammad, what's your tabata of the week?
Kuni ran away. He can't keep up with this topic. So mine is just this whole idea of the August 24 Flag Day celebration. This Flag Day celebration is it's not worth it. I think there are too many holidays in Liberia. I mean, why Flag Day celebration? It's in Liberia that you have all these different holidays. You have J.J. Roberts' birthday. You have Tubman birthday. Instead of consolidating all of this into President's birthday, right? Just the President's Day, for example. Flag Day. Flag Day can be celebrated during the Independence Day celebration. Just call it Independence Day celebration. So the idea that we will continue to celebrate, to close all of our businesses and government offices and losing hundreds of thousands if not millions of dollars by doing that. The economists will tell you that it's really a big top of that needs to be reevaluated.
Thank you. Mr. Kuni.
My man, they got plenty of Tabata going on in Liberia the whole week. There is one that claimed my attention. The youth in Lofa County, they wrote a petition to Senator Zago, charging him for different kinds of things, using his position to promote division and other things like that. And the youth, they did the thing they're supposed to do in a democracy. I mean, your elected representative, you carry your concerns to your representative. And surprisingly, Senator Zago said they can't even read. They call and say, they can't read me, they can't even spell, they can't even read. And that is the intelligentsia mentality that I think is really complete Tabata. When the youth vote for politicians, the politician praise them. They are enlightened. They are good youth. But when the very youth take their grievances to the same politician against them, they give them all kinds of names, that grown-up people, that uneducated people, that Zogo boys. I think that's complete Tabata. And Zago is a Tabata behavior. You should try to listen to a constituent instead of calling them names.
Ms. Washington?
Yeah, sure. I thought it was kind of comical and actually ironical that Edwin Snow, who we know during the Taylor's administration when he was at LPRC, he engaged in massive corruption over there. I had a hard copy of the LPRC report with him when I was at the Inquirer newspaper. And and Edwin Snow knows that, or he should knows that he is just probably just one step away from making any sanction list for a lot of violations. So for Edwin Snow to be telling McGill, oh no, don't keep quiet, go and defend yourself, be talking plenty all over the place, take the Americans on. After, this is unacceptable, the people lie on you, go and defend yourself. My thing is, even if McGill feels, because he has the right, to defend himself, he has the right to feel he didn't do anything if he thinks that he didn't do anything. But if I was a friend of McGill or were close to him, I would just tell him right now, just be quiet or disengage yourself and try to start putting things in place to see if you can get your name on off that sanction list, because the sanction is not permanent. Instead of listening to somebody like Edwin Snow, who actually, as far as I'm concerned, should have been on the sanction list long time before George Weah even became senator. So for me, I think it's just pure Tabata on the part of Edwin Snow to be counseling McGill at this time, to be telling him, go and fight this leper here, that your hand is in the mouth. Go and fight them. Pure Tabata.
Mr. Wesley, what's your Tabata?
Tabata of the hour. I think it is just unfortunate that those who, I think it is just unfortunate that those who, I think it is just unfortunate that those who, I think it is just unfortunate that those who, I think it is just unfortunate that those who, I think it is just unfortunate that those who, I think it is just unfortunate that those who, I think it is just unfortunate that those who, I think it is just unfortunate that those who, I think it is just unfortunate that those who, I think it is just unfortunate that those who, I think it is just unfortunate that those who, I think it is just unfortunate that those who, I think it is just unfortunate that those who, I think it is just unfortunate that those who, I think it is just unfortunate that those who, I think it is just unfortunate that those who, I think it is just unfortunate that those who, I think it is just unfortunate that those who, I think it is just unfortunate that those who, I think it is just unfortunate that those who, I think it is just unfortunate that those who, I think it is just unfortunate that those who, I think it is just unfortunate that those who, I think it is just unfortunate that those who, I think it is just unfortunate that those who present themselves as an alternative to George Weah do not have the courage to stand up and face George Weah in any way, that it will take sub militants alone to stage a protest when the sub militants are not the ones who are offering themselves as an alternative to George Weah. It is so unfortunate that we have an opposition of cowards, people who are not ready to be called the genuine alternative, but they're only looking for a silver platter to seize the moment. No, we don't seize the moment like that. It has to be earned, it has to be worked for, and it has to take courage. That's the kind of Tabata I see here. Weak, cowardized opposition. Mr. Kumi laughing. Who see themselves an alternative to Mr. Kumi and his people.
Thank you. Mr. Salif, what's your Tabata of the week?
I like that, and Mr. Wesley's the latter part of it. As his people. Uh, listen, my Tabata is
You guys are siblings, you know, they always fight.
exactly where he's gonna come after me. I have thick skin. Uh, my Tabata is that so the soup guys, the youth, you know, they want to protest against the government, fix the state, fix the country. Um, and I don't know if this is planted or this, you know, the Henry Costa posted and came back and said, "Oh, and now that I realize maybe it's not true." So this whole thing that the police was serving soup, the student protesters had meal.
New democracy.
Now, this is not the police, a peace force that we've been calling for all along. We've known this police force to be one that brutalizes Liberian citizens, youth, students, you know, people of dissenting voices. We've over the last several years under this administration, we can count all of a sudden the police is bringing kind of like the businessman Jetty, you know, who sells hot meals every holiday, right? The police is mimicking that, and not even in a genuine way. And yet, these some young people wearing t-shirts that shows that they were members, you know, of this the soup students who were protesting, collecting this meal, and you went to protest against the government for corruption, for bad governance, to fix the country, right? To have more people sanctioned because that is apparently bringing people into a check. The police then starts to do this thing as a propaganda. The government sets up a propaganda program against you, and you fall into it. Maybe that speaks to the corruption we're talking about all over the place, and the poverty begets corruption, corruption begets poverty. It was just a complete tabata. Man, you have to have some kind of discipline. Even if I'm hungry, I'll go home. I don't want your food. Keep it to yourself. It affects the country. You know, that was a complete tabata. Either way, either to the student side or the police side. It just didn't make sense.
Thank you. We'll bring our viewers to seeing some Tabata
Very
viewers.
interesting.
Keep yours coming. My Tabata of the week is to watch my senator from Sino County, Honorable Milton Tieje, talking complete Tabata in chamber. So the requirement to become the director of the Liberian Aviation Authority, the minimum is bachelor degree. And the brother who went for the confirmation does not, he admitted he does not have. But somehow in his CV, he has completed 190 credit hours. And Senator TJ is arguing that bachelor is less than 190 credits. So since this guy got 190 credit, he got more than a bachelor.
Bachelor plus.
Right. That to me, coming from my senator from Sino County, one of the three original counties, I believe that's complete Tabata. Like regardless where you got the credit from, whether you got them in 8 different schools, whatever, so long you have 190, you have bachelor plus. And he said
Wow.
something else, which I'm not going to go into. Like, since you said you told us you operated a business in America, that country America,
Oh
and you
my
were not
God.
charged for fraud, so you are qualified.
Oh, you serious?
Oh yeah, yeah. You should have seen it. Yeah.
Oh man,
Yeah.
and Africa, it's a real tragedy. It's a
Right.
real Liberia is just a tragedy.
Let's go to Mr. Jefferson Coco. Say, my Tabata of this week is Mr. Eugene Fagon's statement to our president. And some Priscilla, what's your Tabata? I say I should take my Tabata from here. That's and this one from Pala Urito too. My Tabata was soup forgot about protesting and started eating.
Yeah.
Before good food ways in.
A better boss.
Evans Morrison, my Tabata is Yeka Koluwa wearing a dress in chambers and being kicked out of session and then proceeded to be disruptive out the chamber of the legislature. We got more Tabata here coming. Keep bringing your Tabata here. And Sam Wallow, the failure of the religious leader is to perform their duty as the conscience of society is a grave Tabata. Flomo Livingston, my Tabata is so-called pastor prayer to God for a corrupt government for a sanction to be lifted. All right. Those are the Tabata for the day. At this time, we're going to take 40 seconds each to go around the room for your closing. Lady and gentlemen, I want to appreciate you so much for your time. We've gone almost 2 hours, so let's use 45 seconds each for closing. Let me start with Mr. Wesley.
Our fight against corruption has to be holistic. Our institutions of state are weak, the political will lacking, the judiciary bereft, the first bench of government compromise. Notwithstanding, our push to ensure the fight against corruption should be unreserved. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Sharif.
Yeah, so corruption is endemic in Liberia, but it can be addressed. It can be curbed, as you said at the top of the show. The political will is not there, and a lot of my colleagues on this panel have said something very interesting, which is it goes with impunity, and because of that, it's allowed to fester. And there are those among us who even believe, even with all of us going on, that this government deserves another term in office. And I think that that is the tragedy in Liberia, because even though we recognize that there is a problem, we've diagnosed the problem, but we do nothing to solve the problem. And so it will be allowed to fester. And unfortunately, Liberia will be continued to be counted among the poorest countries in the world, even though this country is not poor. There are resources in the gazillions in Liberia. We only need the efficient leadership, which we don't have.
Thank you. Mr. Salif.
I think that I agree with my colleagues. Corruption is endemic. We know what corruption is. We can smell it when we smell it. Corruption kills. It undermines everything. It undermines growth. Um, in that context, it would take an unprecedented action by the executive leadership, the president of the country, giving the all-powerful presidency in our country. We've seen other countries in Africa where presidents have stood up, heads of state have stood up, and they've made a dent in corruption. Currently in Malawi, the current Malawian president declared war on corruption. It's firing ministers left and right. It reduced the power of the president, the vice president, seeking constitutional amendments. I mean, things like that. We saw uh, in Tanzania. The point is that political will that we talk about all the time. People tend to question, what does that really mean? It only means the willingness to take action, difficult action, even if it's against you, in the interest of the state. That's what we need to do. We don't know when and how that's going to happen, but that's what the power that we are to think about. Otherwise, the Americans are going to continue to come after our leaders. They'll continue to disgrace our political leaders. More sanctions are coming. I'm sorry to say, but from the look of things, a lot of heads are going to roll, and enforcement action will affect people who don't even think that they have anything to do with sanction. Because if you do anything to undermine the sanction, to aid and abet, to assist those who are impacted, who are designated, you find yourself in some kind of tight corner. So again, our president, the executive mansion has to take action to help Liberia.
Mr. Kone.
I go back to law enforcement again. There is a common saying we have: for the crime to be committed, you need there are two things that have to work together: the intent and the opportunity. So it's also with corruption. Uh, we may not be able to control the intent because that is within individuals. The question is, can we control the opportunity? And that is also linked to the theory of the economic benefit of crime. In our country, corruption is highly rewarded. Unless as a society we can come together where we can reduce the reward from corruption and increase the punishment for corruption, we'll be back here whether we change government today or we change government tomorrow.
Thank you. Ms. Washington, you got the last word.
Um, in 20, I think it was in 2012, when then President Ellen Johnson Sirleaf was attending the United Nations meeting on the Millennium Development Goals. It was a follow-up meeting they were having in London. And at that meeting, she was interviewed by somebody from the Guardian newspaper, the Guardian London, and about corruption in Liberia. They were talking about money that her son had allegedly taken and blah, 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 blah. And she said that the fight against corruption was an uphill battle because corruption was systemic and endemic in Liberia. So you have this kind of quote unquote world class, renowned president basically telling you there's nothing that someone like her or her government could do about corruption. I'm making this point to say how deep the issue of corruption is and how much trouble Liberia is in. So for me, the first place we need to start is corruption doesn't start from the top. No, it's not a paradigm that or UN paradigm where you start changing things, from the top. No, it starts from the bottom because these people don't get corrupt immediately. They go to office and they decide to be corrupt. They learn it from the community. Liberians start getting corrupt from the community, from the schools, from the homes. They start stealing from there. They start telling lies. They start manipulating the teachers to the schools, taking the textbooks, making photocopies, and letting children pay, impregnating young girls and stuff. So corruption starts from down, and then when people have the opportunity Kuni talk about opportunity. People have the opportunity to go to public office and they take it there because that's when the culture of impunity also presents another opportunity for them. So they've already grown up from little in this system where corruption in so many different ways is happening. Okay, and then they go to public office. It is being basically endorsed because nothing happens. People become father of the year after stealing. Somebody insulted me the other day on Save the State because I mentioned Benana Yue, and I'm like, he's not the best example of a businessman whatsoever because the money it didn't come from his pocket. So people, the Liberian society itself, from that level, from the bottom up level, needs to change. Our people need to change. We need to educate the ordinary people, and the legislature. We need to keep calling out our national legislatures, because honestly, there's a lot that they can do. Why it is true that everybody like to focus on the presidency, but I like to say all the time, Josh Weah inherited, honestly, Josh Weah inherited a mess. Yes, he's not doing everything right. He's making some mistakes, but by and large, Josh Weah inherited all the mess. Corruption had already delivered her twin, and they were just in because they were premature, they were in incubation when Josh Weah got there. So Josh Weah didn't create a situation. Even Ellie herself, they said it. So we need to look at the root cause of the problem. We need to look at the root cause of the problem. And like President JFK said, you always condemn the darkness, always condemn the darkness. However, light to your candle. Okay, so it's good to blame we are them because they're there now. They promised us that we were going to fix it when they campaign. So we hold them responsible to fix it and not to add their own to it. But this situation with corruption is really deep.
Thank you so much. Tomorrow, join my man Ansoni CA as he hosts the president of EULA, Mr. Shehu Kamara, who got some explaining to do about the EULA, the money that was promised to EULA by Mr. Nathaniel McGill, who is now sanctioned and suspended. They're going to talk other issues. You don't want to miss that. It's right here on Focus on Liberia, the Hour of Politics. And at 6, we're going to have the literary hour with Dr. K. Moses Sayer and our resident scholar, Jackie Sayer. Always focus on Liberia. We educate, we elevate, and promote all things Liberian. And we want to thank you again for coming for tonight. We want to thank our viewers for always being here on Focus on Liberia. At this time, we're going to close with our song that says, "We are all Liberians." Whether you believe corruption because people are inherently wicked, and they take that wickedness to public office, or you believe human beings are inherently good and it is a society that corrupt them, we are all Liberians. What we should do, though, is to make sure that our country becomes the glorious land of liberty. Good night, and God bless you.
We are Liberian. Liberia is our home. Liberian people. United we want. Liberia, oh. United we want. Liberia, Liberia. Oh,